Tonight, human remains. Police investigating Dawson Creek's second murder of the year. Fatal accident. One person is dead after an explosion at a gas site. And major bust. Almost 100 firearms seized near Fairview. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. And we begin tonight with the second murder of the year in Dawson Creek. The North District Major Crime Unit has taken over the investigation and are releasing very little information. But police have been at 3 crime scenes in and around the Dawson Creek area in the last 2 days. It's not clear if or how the scenes may be connected. And at this point, we can't say if the deceased was a male or female. But Mounties were at a duplex on 116th Avenue and 16th Street. And an officer also securing the scene at 107th Avenue. Neighbors there saying the police arrived at the house around 9 o'clock Monday morning. Officers going door to door in the neighborhood asking if anyone heard or saw anyone. There was also a large police presence, including a drone at 231 Road in South Dawson. CJDC-TV News reached out to the North District Major Crime Unit in Prince George, and they confirmed they located human remains Monday and that the death is being treated as suspicious. They add police are working quickly to capture all available evidence and are looking to speak with anyone with any information on the case. An explosion at a Peace Region oil and gas plant has killed one person and sent another to hospital. It happened Monday at Tourmaline's Grande plant at around 6 o'clock Monday night. Sources tell CJDC-TV News that a pile driver truck struck a pipeline at the site, sparking an explosion. 5 ambulances rushed to the scene near Wanawan. 2 people were treated for injuries. One was rushed to hospital in critical condition, the other in serious condition. Sources say a contract worker has since died of his injuries. WorkSafe BC and the Fort St. John RCMP are investigating. And the BC Energy Regulator has also sent inspectors to the scene. Nearly 100 firearms have been seized from a property in Fairview. Mounties getting a tip from the public about guns on the property. Well, the Alberta RCMP say they also seized generators, a motorcycle, numerous trailers, and ATVs. A search warrant was executed back on April the 5th. Officers found 91 guns, most with handmade price tags ready to be resold, and a large amount of ammunition. While on the property, police noted a number of other possible stolen items. The emergency department in Tumbler Ridge is on diversion. Northern Health says the health center's daytime emergency department was interrupted Monday morning at 7 due to staffing challenges. Services are expected to return to normal on Wednesday. The health authority saying after-hours emergency care is provided on an on-call basis. Tumbler Ridge and area residents who require emergency care during regular hours, after hours, or on weekends should always call 911 for transport to the nearest available care facility. The province needs to find a tailored approach for Indigenous-specific issues related to overdose deaths. That, according to the First Nations Health Authority Chief Medical Officer. Dr. Nell Weeman says the goal of preventing more people from dying, she says fewer Indigenous people in BC died of toxic drug overdoses last year relative to the year before, but their death rate was still, on average, 6.7 times higher than other BC residents. That's the largest gap between First Nations and other residents in toxic drug deaths since 2016, when the public health emergency was declared. The First Nations Health Authority estimates measures such as overdose prevention sites and take-home naloxone kits prevented at least 1,024 potential deaths between 2018 and 2022. Folks who are sick and hoping for a short-term reprieve from work will no longer be required to present a doctor's note justifying their need for a leave. The Minister of Health was in Victoria today making good on the NDP's promise to restrict the need for doctor's notes in relation to short-term leaves in BC. Motivation for the move stems from a provincial healthcare crisis that's pushed nurses and general practitioners to the brink of their working capabilities. The province says reducing the need for tedious paperwork will help free up time for healthcare professionals to better focus on your health. The new rules will go into effect in the fall, just in time for cold and flu season. The County of Grande Prairie has issued one of the first fire advisories of the year. The county includes Beaver Lodge, Sexsmith, and Demet. Officials there say strong winds and dry grass conditions have prompted the alert. Existing fire permits are still valid. However, new permits will be issued on a case-by-case basis. Inflation in Canada eased last month. It was helped by lower gas prices and a drop in travel to the United States. The inflation rate in March was 2.3%. That's down from 2.6% in February. The data comes a day before the Bank of Canada makes its next interest rate decision. Canada's housing market also cooled significantly in March. The Canadian Real Estate Association says sales activity sank nearly 5% month over month and 9% on an annualized basis. Well, on the eve of the federal election debate, leaders were caught off guard today by reports Honda was planning to shift some Canadian production to the United States. While Honda quickly put the brakes on those rumors, party leaders spent much of the day explaining why their plans would be most likely to keep automakers in the country. Michael Couture has more.
It's a war.
A simple description for the otherwise complicated trade dispute. With Honda's decision unclear in the morning, the Liberal leader laid out how Canadian incentives should help automakers keep production on this side of the border.
They will get 100% remission on our counter tariffs. So in other words, our counter tariffs won't apply if they continue to produce, continue to employ, continue to invest in Canada. If they don't, they will get 25% tariffs on what they are importing into Canada. Okay, so the incentives are there.
Having spoken to the president of Honda, Ontario Premier Doug Ford downplayed reports of the automaker moving production.
Well, we're going to keep Honda here, and I'll do everything I can to protect the people and their jobs.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Pierre Poilievre condemned U.S. President Donald Trump for imposing tariffs on Canada's auto sector, which could see companies consider moving production south. The Conservative leader was firm on what he would do in response.
We should not lift the counter tariffs.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh expressed concern for the auto workers who were caught in the middle, and he wants to see safeguards put in place to keep those jobs in this country.
If you're going to sell a car in Canada, you have to have a footprint in Canada, meaning you have to make cars here or you have to have jobs here.
On a day when leaders are supposed to be preparing to debate topics like climate change and the cost of living, it was the trade war and its impacts that overshadowed everything again. Michael Couture, CTV News, Montreal.
And despite those disruptions in Canada's auto sector, party leaders forging ahead with new policy announcements on the campaign trail today. They're also contending with late-day rescheduling of tomorrow's French debate. CTV's Colton Prairie reports.
It was a busy morning in Montreal.
We're going to pass the Stop Scamming Seniors Act, a common sense law that forces banks and telecom companies to deploy state-of-the-art technology to catch scams and stop them before they happen.
Pierre Poilievre said he would force banks to flag suspicious activity in real time and put a 24-hour hold on suspicious transactions made by seniors. Nearby, the NDP also focusing on money, promising to bring back the increase to the capital gains inclusion rate that came in under the Trudeau government.
That would have raised $19 billion over 5 years, a measure that we could have used that revenue to invest in people.
Just outside Montreal, Mark Carney says he'd invest in workers, offering a $15,000 training benefit for mid-career workers in key sectors. It's the second day in a row all three major leaders held just one campaign event, and part of a larger slowdown across the campaign trail that's seen fewer daily photo ops over the last 4 days as the focus shifts to debates, kicking off in Montreal tomorrow, and a major test for political newcomer Mark Carney.
I'm going to concentrate on neither attack nor defense, but I will focus on transparency to inform those Canadians who choose to watch the debate.
Pollsters say the French debate has the potential to upset the stability that's seen the Liberals hold a relatively steady lead over the course of the campaign.
What we've seen is when the Liberal numbers go down, the Bloc go up. So that's good news for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives when the vote splits like that.
The Bloc are the only party that hasn't slowed down their campaign in the lead up to the debates. Today, Yves-François Blanchet made a pair of policy stops, looking to abolish religious exemptions for hate speech from the criminal code and increase federal health care transfers to provinces. Meanwhile, tomorrow's French debate has now been moved earlier into the evening, but will still conflict with a crucial Montreal Canadiens game. The Bloc and NDP had both pushed for it to be moved. Colton Prale, CTV News, Ottawa.
The federal government is temporarily exempting some sectors from retaliatory tariffs imposed on the United States. For 6 months, Canadian companies will not have to pay duties on American goods used for manufacturing, processing, and food and beverage packaging. The temporary relief will also apply to companies that import from the United States to support healthcare, public safety, and national security objectives. Ottawa says the plan is intended to give companies more time to adjust their supply chains and become less dependent on U.S. suppliers. Canadian-based automakers will also be allowed to import a certain number of American-assembled free trade compliant vehicles. That is, if they continue to produce vehicles in Canada and complete planned investments in this country. Well, today, reporters also asked the White House for clarification on recent comments from Donald Trump suggesting a possible pause on auto tariffs.
The point the president was making is flexibility, and he has flexibility when it comes to negotiations and talks, but ultimately his goal in his fair trade deals that he is pursuing with many countries around the world is to put the American worker first.
The White House press secretary also saying today that Trump has not changed his stance that the U.S. has been subsidizing Canada's defense. She says he still believes Canadians would benefit greatly from becoming the 51st state. The ramping up of deportation efforts by the Trump administration has led to a surge in asylum seekers at the Canadian-U.S. border over the last 2 weeks. Claimants, mostly of Haitian origin, have been making their way north, particularly to Quebec. Genevieve Beauchemin is at the Saint-Bernard-de-la-Cal border crossing with some new numbers to share tonight.
Change of policy by U.S. President Donald Trump is pushing more and more migrants to try and seek refuge here on Canadian soil. There are some visible signs of that jump in the number of asylum seekers here. The Canadian Border Services Agency has brought in additional personnel. Now, the surge is actually quite recent. Here's the latest data that we've obtained. This year, the number of claimants across the country has actually been down significantly, 53% less compared to 2024. But since April 1st, 1,411 people have claimed asylum at the Saint-Bernard-de-la-Cal land crossing. Now compare that to the same period last year, the number was 319. This has several organizations and community groups scrambling to find resources to help with basic needs like food and housing. Colette Casavant of the Family Support Center Maman et Papa says resources are already stretched thin. Most of the people seeking refuge here are from Haiti and had been living in the U.S. under special programs that suspended deportations. But the U.S. president ended the programs, and a letter went out to Haitians without status asking them to leave the country by April 24th. The number of asylum seekers had gone down significantly since 2023, since the third Safe Country Agreement was extended to the entire border. Now, that agreement forces asylum seekers to make their claim in the U.S. if they enter that country first. And so many of those who actually show up here are turned around and sent back to the United States, but there are exceptions, including for those who have close family in Canada.
To California now, where Governor Gavin Newsom is extending an olive branch, or in this case, a redwood branch, to Canadians.
The Golden State and Canada have always shared so much in common. Sure, you know who's trying to stir things up back in D.C., but don't let that ruin your beach plans. California, it's the ultimate playground, 2,000 miles from Washington and a world away in mindset.
Governor Newsom launched a campaign hoping to encourage Canadians to visit his state. The governor's team says the message is in response to the recent drop in tourism to California. It's a result of Donald Trump's policies and threats to make Canada the 51st U.S. state. Newsom says 2 million Canadians visited last year, while the city of Palm Springs put up dozens of red banners around town that feature a heart with a Canadian flag nestled between the words Palm Springs and Canada. Harvard is now the first major university to reject White House demands in exchange for funding. The demands from the Trump administration include sweeping changes to admissions, hiring practices, DEI programs, and it also insists the university screen students for anti-Semitism and sympathizing with terrorist groups. The White House says it's freezing over $2 billion in grants to Harvard and has also threatened its tax-exempt status. All right, please do stay tuned. I'll be right back after the break with a look at weather.